Was originally settled out on the Giant's Grave out on 33 West out of Cooper's Mountain. It was called Cooper's Mountain and later called the Giant's Grave. And then later my grandfather, he settled at the foot of Shenandoah Mountain as you start into Skidmore Fork. That's where he had a three-story house at one time. And then a little cabin further about a quarter of a mile up, along up in Skidmore. And from the place, that was built for another couple for at least for 4 or 5 years or so. And so then later he lived there and at the foot over at the foot with the house, and he used to carry the mail. Had the mail route from Harrisonburg to Franklin and back for 3 terms. And then he had done a lot of sawing, had a sawmill on up in Dunkle, or near the Dunkle, on up above in Skidmore, head of Skidmore. And he had the sawmill there, and then he done a lot of putting out timber. And one place, the timber was inside the Audubon United Methodist Church. He hauled in for the timbers in the sanctuary around there, and some flooring work around there. That was 1918. It was about the time it was built, I think. And that was in various other places all around over here and there and around. Different people bought lumber. He hauled out a lot of lumber too, and had the mail route. And he lived there for quite a few years until he died in 1924. And my grandmother she sold the land in 25, and the city bought it, and all but a little 8.83 100 acres. And it had the old cabin that was built on it for a couple. We still had the cabin there, and later was sold. In back before when Ed Friddle, he built a place up on the top of Shenandoah Mountain, right at the Route 33 across the West Virginia line, and he built it at the time when Virginia was dry, no alcohol allowed, and of course West Virginia had alcohol, so he built it up there for selling many gallons of alcohol. And he had plenty of big business only for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. I don't know just how long, but anyway, and of course he had 2 Sinclair gas pumps out there too at the time. What I remember, the Sinclair big sign up there, and he had these pumps up there. And my dad always said that he may have got rid of that first load of gas, but he don't know much after that. He said because he sold many more gallons of alcohol, much more, many more hundreds of gallons of alcohol. He did any gasoline, but the pumps used to set up there yet. I remembered going and running all through the place when I was little, and up in stairs, downstairs, and I could see a counter inside of one side of the building, and the dance hall set out on the outside, out and open. Oh, they used to have a lot of big dances up there, cutting up and having big times over weekends and different times. Said everybody, used to say that everybody, I heard that anyway, that everyone from this side of the mountain all rolled up there. Said they was a busy place there, only for a couple of years. And said then then they got alcohol later in Virginia, and that sort of stopped everything then, and the business, everything went kaplunk up there then. They didn't have much business then. Even I even have in the little brown books just been put out. He had 3 or 4 cabins built back there for people to stay overnight. But they was awful rough looking things. Behind it, I said, and then later there was a Getz fellow, Ray Getz, and his wife. They had it built right on the same foundation. They built a home there and lived there for a good many years. Back in the late 40s, I think, or 50s. The cabin was built on that same foundation and a little extra addition they had around, and they had to use own generators to generate so many thousand-watt current for their own power. There was no current going up that way, and that's the way the other old station. It was an old Delco system. What you had to let it build up, get current built back up in the batteries there, and then you could have your current of a night, and you had plenty of current then for so long of a night, and then you have to let it rest in the daytime, and be able to get more current. They had on up through Skidmore about right now would be sitting under the center of the dam, about in the middle of the dam, somewhere along there. It was known as the old halfway house. Now, not the kind of halfway house that everybody talks of today out north, but that was an old road run up through the original old road, went up through Skidmore, and then you got it about where the dam is. You turn to your right, made a short turn, and zig back and forth, backtrack up and around, and come out under the top of Shenandoah Mountain, where the road is today, right just under where Getz's home was at that time, and that's where you would come out. It's grown up like everything, but that people would lay over the night. They'd stop and get a bite to eat, maybe go on across the Brandywine, or they'd come the other way. They'd get something to eat, and or then go into town, or lay overnight and then come into town. And they some nights there'd be a real big gang there, quite a crowd, different people traveling back and forth. Other times they wouldn't be so busy. That was the main road up until sometime in before I was born. It was then the road was changed out near where the old follows the old main 33, but it was way back in, went back into hollows more horseshoe bends around back up in there, and rough and dirt. Of course, it was a dirt road. My grandfather, he lived down at the foot of the mountain. He used to go along up through there with a scraper with some mules hooked to it, and scrape the road ever so often. And they used to stop in there then later when the road was changed and put the near similar to where the road goes now, but a lot more back end curves and twists and turns, dirt and all. And they used to people lay over there at my grandfather's, right out under the foot of the Shenandoah Mountain, right under the 33. They laid out under that, and the road went, and the house was there, a 3-story house, and then he got a lot of people that used to come in overnight. And he had a 3-story house, and had the about 3 beds. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms in the place, and then down the basement section of it was the kitchen and the dining room, and they get a lot of people laying over. But he had different times. He'd go to the barn and sleep. They didn't have enough room for him, so he'd go to the barn and sleep. He had 3 sisters, of course. They stayed there at the house, but he'd go out and sleep at the barn. My granddad had the mail route for 3 terms, and they was 4 years each, and he carried up until the last term, last 2 years of that term. He put a T-model Ford, a 1918 T-model Ford on the route. Before that, it was carried with 4 mules and a wagon, and they'd leave 5:30 in the morning from the Harrisonburg post office over by where it used to be on North Main. And he'd leave out there about 5:30 in the morning and head out and leave a side mail along out as you went along at the different farms along the way, and then exchange at Dale Enterprise, and they exchanged. They had a post office there at the Minick store then at that time on the left, and then you on out to Hinton, and the Hinton now was last used as a little pants store there, they called it. But anyway, that was a post office one time, and other places there was other places too at one time. They exchange the mail each time. You'd exchange it. Some picked up to come in this way and over to West Virginia, different areas. Each time you change that there, and then he'd take it on through to near noon. He'd stop and eat dinner at the house that my grandfather's at, and they head on up the mountain. And another person would come from West Virginia at Franklin. He'd load at the same time. He at 5:30 in the morning. He'd head on through and exchange at a couple places between Brandywine and there. He had the post office, a couple post offices, and they exchanged there. Then he'd leave the mail along there. Then they would one come on into to Harrisonburg from West Virginia, and he would go on. My father would go on in to Franklin that evening about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and 6:30 sometime in the evening. A lot of mail, and they lay overnight. Each one laid over, and then started out after they had the stuff postmarked or whatever. Then they start back each time, and they done that for all the first 3 terms up until half of the first 2 terms, till after the half of the last term. And then he put the T-model truck on, and after that then they would carry the mail out, leave the mail along at the places, same places, and until they got near whoever met the top of the mountain and exchange mail. Then they would go back. My dad would come back towards Harrisonburg, and one from West Virginia come back and go back over into Franklin, and for that night. Then they'd be back at their home and that night, and that's the way they carried the mail. Of course, one time it was an extra cold morning, and my dad, he was bundled up right heavy there, and he felt all right. He didn't notice anything cold about it, being out the weather or anything. So he gets out to the Minick there at Dale Enterprise, and the store to your left as you old 30, it goes over towards old 33, the curve there, and down in the hollow, like, and the fellow, the Minick come out and said, "Oh, you know something?" Says 21 below zero. This morning, and he said he was about to freeze to death the rest of the way up the mountain there that day. So anyway, he didn't freeze to death, but so that's the way it used to be with the mail, carrying the mail. It was quite a job in them days. Well, of course, I heard, yeah, and I saw too. I have a drawing of both places there, showing that flagpole looking back east over down through the Valley, Rockingham County, and all. And but in the year, I forget the year when I made the drawing, but but I think it was in the 70s or 80s. We was out over that area, and I found a little fallen down shack with a one little corner. Had a wee little fireplace in one corner. The door, no doors or no windows. Where the windows were was knocked out, and they were gone. There was not even any framework in it for woodwork or anything, but just a stone, and the roof was off of it. But I was always told, back even when I was growing up by my dad, that that was for draft dodgers. It was either during the Civil War or during World War One. I think maybe both. I don't know, but I got a drawing of that, and looking from Flagpole out about Flagpole and Richland Mountain, and the road you still can walk on that where you can come down around through, still come down into Skidmore. On up in Skidmore ways there near about where, I'm not sure just where, but about where the old halfway house was. I used to see a grade, slow grade going, starting up up into from the mountain there, along in towards, run in towards the mountain. And I always heard my dad said they'd hunt, they'd go squirrel hunting and rabbit hunting and different things like that, and squirrel and oh, a deer. Later on, bear too, and they'd talk about Railroad Hollow. And I always wondered why they talked about a railroad hollow. I could never see any railroad there. So he showed me many years ago. He said, "See that grade starting into the mountain?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, there." He said it was it never went through. It fell through. It never did happen. But he said people put money in it, a stock in the thing, and he said it was going to be a great railroad from the C&W, what was known as Crook and Weedy. Was later, but anyway, it was going to have a big railroad line run up 33 near out west, and go through the mountains back into the coal fields back in West Virginia. That was what was in a mine, but it's some reason it just got never developed. But said people, I heard he said people put money into it, and but it's kind of a hoax. It never developed. Then out here at the crossroads where you go to Lily and Clover Hill, or go across 33, if you look on out to your left, across to your left on 33, on the other side of 33, you'll see a long mountain across there, in the shape of a head and like a giant's grave. It's known as Cooper's Mountain, and that's where my great granddad, great grandfather, great great grandfather settled, and Leonard B. Cooper. And I always wondered. Then they talk about out at the Giant's grave. I used to hear talk about the Giant's grave, and so anyway, I always said it was where and my Uncle Leonard, he lived there on the mountain there later on. Leonard C. Cooper, L.C. Cooper, and Benson lives there now. But anyway, I always wondered why they had a Giant's grave mentioned there at one time. And so finally, I was around hunting, and I was out at the college there, JMU, and I found a paper. Was in September 29th, 1893. It had the legend of Raleigh Valley, and a woman was up on when Raleigh Springs was booming. The big businesses there in the summertime, and people come from Baltimore and New Washington and everywhere, all around the country to come in there and spend the summer. This woman here, she tells a story to some children, and she was Ella T. Brodus, I believe, from Louisville, Kentucky. That's where she was from, and she was telling a story to a bunch of children, and he was looking back east down 33, and there's out to your left, they're set to out there over near Lover's Leap, set there the mountain, the Giant's grave, looking east. And she told him this fine old story. There was a big old giant come out of a cliff there, and he loved the animals and the flowers, and he always looked at the Orion and the other stars, and Big Dipper, and he looked and he thought, oh, how he with Orion and his belt and all there, and so he'd like to have another person his size, but he lived on. He was a lonely old fellow, and so he lived for quite a few years. For many years, and then finally he passed away, and said it was another. Then it told, and the woman tells her there was another giant come by, and said, meantime though, him and the animals, he loved all the animals and the flowers and the trees, and he was awful lonely. So when he passed away, another one come by and said, now today, that's why you'll find out here past the crossroads, you'll find this giant's grave covered with trees and flowers and all around over the mountain, and said that's where the old giant was buried. And that's how he got the name of the giant's grave. Also, when my grandfather and grandmother lived there at right at the foot of the mountain, in the three-story house, in 1921, there'd been a bear getting in a garden around there and eating up stuff, and they went on a hunt. My grandmother went along, and she had a 4440 Winchester, a saddle gun then, and my grandfather, he had a new, it was a 1905 Winchester, automatic self-loading Winchester. So they went up through Skidmore around, hunting along up through the place there, looking along the way for a bear, hunting around, and it was kind of cool weather. So they got above where our cabin set, about a quarter mile or more up in from the road, from 33 or more. And my grandmother looked up to my side of Dundore Mountain, and she said, "There's a den back in there." I said, "Reckon there'd be anything in there?" She said, "Well, you can go up and look." So she went on up, climbed up the side of the mountain just a little ways up the side there, wasn't too far, and looked in. And when she looked in, she saw two eyes looking out at her, and she said, "Here he is, here he is." And he said, "Well, shoot it." And she up and shot the thing right quick, right in the face and between the eyes, or the eye, I don't know what. And so it weighed near 400 pounds, somewhere along there. He and the others, couple others, fellows helped drag it out. And so it weighed near 200 pounds, near 400 pounds. It was 300 and something. And it was a big bear hunt, and she killed a bear that day. In '62, all up and down, all around through Rockingham County, from all the home quarry in the mountains to Shenandoah Mountain to I reckon up in the Gap area, maybe where a lot of mountains, Brock's Gap area around in that area, wherever the wooded areas, the government sent troops all through here and out over Shenandoah Mountain. They was everywhere. They was out over Feedstone Mountain to the right at 33, where you come into our cabin in Skidmore. They was out in that way, and they was all up in around Skidmore and up back on Dundore Mountain everywhere. And troops was running around booming and banging and banging. You hear a lot of booming and banging, and so we heard that was going on. So my dad, we'll be here 2 weeks. So my dad said we got to stay at the cabin. So we got to the cabin, and we spent 2 weeks up there. So then a lot of the fellows would come by. They'd drop by. Howdy there. Hi there. How are you? We chatted with the different ones, just privates and sergeants, and then this one lieutenant and a captain, and I believe the other was a sergeant. I'm not sure. Posey. I remember they always called Sergeant Posey. He was a colored fellow, so those three, I don't remember which was which, but they come along and got to come loafing around there with us a little bit when he was off out of break camp or whatever, and we got to know him right well there. And so mother, she said, "Oh, you like some coffee?" We didn't know it, but they'd like some. And heads popped up all around us, and we could have been. They could have mowed us down right around us. They popped up across the road. They popped up behind the cabin, everywhere else. She said, "Wait a minute, I gotta fix a big jug of coffee." She fixed a large container, urn or whatever of coffee then, and they all come by. All of them got the canteen, little in their canteen cup. They put a little there. So, "Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you, thank you, thank you." We had a lot of coffee got out that day, and then later these other three, they'd come by, stop around then, and so this one, he got talking then for food or something. I don't know how it got started, but he was from Georgia or down south somewhere. He started mentioning about cornbread, and so after they left, mother said she told my dad to go down to somewhere here. I don't know just where he went. He got a few boxes of cornmeal. So they brought it up, and she made quite a few pans of cornbread. They come by then a little later on. She said, "Yeah, I got something for you." And said, "Oh," and after that, boy, was he happy. And him and the fellows, they split it up. A bunch of other fellows all had cornbread. They thanked us for having some cornbread that day. And all for 2 weeks, we had a great time with the fellows up there. They had a great time visiting us.